I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting, regular July meeting of the Wyoming Board of Education. May I have a roll call? Oh, wait, no, I have to call. All right, so Mr. Feldmeyer.
Here.
Mrs. Brockmeyer. What? Would you? Mrs. Brockmeyer.
Carol?
Oh, a wonderful teacher at the middle school. Oh my gosh. Mrs.
Remind me to tell you the story.
You're doing great. It's going great.
I'm here.
And here. Great. All right. Please join me in the pledge.
Don't worry, Rhonda.
It's been a long day. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, to get me out of my misery, may I have a motion for a treasurer pro tem, please? I would like to nominate Heather Jean. Well, thank you. May I have a second to that nomination?
Oh,
all right.
So
Oh,
thanks. Roll call.
Yeah, just do it. Do it right.
Mr. Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas, Mrs. B. Yeah, that one's okay. Mrs. Zoller.
Yes.
Mrs. Roderick.
All right, thank you. All right. So Heather will serve as treasurer pro temporary in the absence of our usual treasurer. And we will move on from there. We are ready for recognition of the public. We do have someone who has signed up for this evening, Joe Brinkman. If you'd like to stand there, please.
Yep. You know me, Joe Brinkman. I live at 1415 North Park Avenue. I wanted to just bring some comments and questions about the primary facilities project on topic. I'm curious, what are the next steps for the primary facilities committee? What actions have been taken after receiving community input through the community conversations? I've talked to a number of people recently. I think people are still frustrated, feel like their voices weren't heard throughout this process. They feel like they don't know what's happening. So I'm hoping more information coming out of this group over the next month, 2 months. I think it would be awesome if we could continue the community conversations that we held in the spring. I think those were a great feedback session. One of the things I noticed looking at the middle school project was that community engagement was step 1 for the middle school project. For the primary facilities project, it was step 6 on that graph that had all the 6 different steps. I thought that was interesting. It looks like a firm has been chosen for pre-bond services. Why was that chosen? Why was that firm selected? And is the communication process still being done? That's all I have. Thank you.
One question, you said, did the communication process still be?
Communication audit. That was mentioned in the last meeting.
All right, well, you've come to the right place because most of those
I think
will be answered this evening. This will be a good meeting. All right, I have no other person on the community recognition of the public, so I'm going to move on to Dr. Kirschner is going to give us a presentation on the primary standards-based report card that she's ready to roll out.
I'm excited to talk to you all about this. And I brought each of you a folder. If you wouldn't mind taking one of these and passing those around. Really, inside the folder, you're just going to see an example of the final copy of our report cards, as well as the presentation of the slides from this evening, in case you would like that for future reference. We're going to talk through all of that here in the next 5 to 10 minutes. But as you know, we have been working on creation of a standards-based report card at the primary. And tonight, I really just want to talk to you about that and give you a heads up about what's to come for this year as we bring this to fruition and roll it out for use with our kids and our students. So I've shown this graphic several times. It really just kind of encompasses the difference between traditional grading and standards-based grading. Where if I use the analogy of taking your car one more time, if you don't mind, it would be like if I take my car to the shop and the mechanic says your car gets a B+. That gives me some information, but not the detailed information that the standards-based report card on the right would give, where it kind of tells me, hey, these are the things that are going really well, and here are the things that need some attention. So I have some actionable steps there from the report on the right. We would really kind of equate what we're doing with standards-based grading to that. Just kind of going back to our strategic plan, we have had this on our strategic plan document where we're thinking about that for the primary for our goals. Last year, it was really one of our teaching and learning goals where we were really digging into the standards and writing the report card. And then this year, it's going to really focus more on the communication and partnership piece. So you'll see that show up in our primary goals again this year. Going back over the past 3 years, or the past 2 years, and this upcoming year, more specifically, you might remember that during the 21-22 school year, the CAC did a study about standards-based grading. And during that time, they dug into grading practices of other high-performing districts here locally and across the country. And their recommendation at that time was for the Wyoming primary school team to collaboratively develop the standards-based report card for all students in grades K through 4. And one of the things that they really recommended strongly was that our teachers have a lot of voice in the creation of those report cards to make sure that we were reporting on the standards that were going to be most useful to our parents and to our students' learning. So from there, last year, we did just that. We dug in, we developed a standards-based report card committee that had representation from every grade level and every special area. And those teachers met with me monthly, and we went through a process to develop our standards-based report card. And then throughout that, between meetings, they would take what we had done back to their entire grade level so that every single staff member in the primary had a voice and had input and feedback on the report card. And really, as they developed the report card, the questions that we kept going back to were, is this going to be meaningful for our families? Is it going to be manageable, meaning something that families would pick up and want to read? And is it comprehensible? Meaning, do we have a lot of jargon in it that is only going to make sense to educators, or is it written in a way that's really comprehensible and understandable to our families? And then, as part of that process, once the report card was written, it was thinking about the logistics of rolling that out so that our families kind of know, this is what I'm looking at here, and this is why we've done it. So that leads us right into this year, which will be our implementation year. We will be onboarding our staff and our families. And when I talk about onboarding our staff, they certainly know this is coming and have had a say in this report card, but they're really beginning to deal with the logistics of how do we mark these report cards in a way that's consistent, and really getting those good practices in place and making that shift from traditional grading to mastery-based grading. I'll talk about in just a minute. In addition to that, we were going to be really thinking and being intentional about how we roll this out for our families. Thinking about, some questions like, when can I expect to get the report card? What does this information tell me? How is this going to help me to partner with my child's teacher and really focus on enhancing my students' learning? So that's kind of our process and where we are in that process. So if I shift back to thinking about, gosh, as we go into this, I wanted you guys to know this core beliefs that we're really going to be coming back to again and again and again as we roll this out to our staff, to our students, and to our families. And that's just these 4 bullets, really thinking about the fact that grades must reflect what students learn. Okay, it really needs to come back to, at this given point in time, what do our students know? What do they understand? And what are they able to do, right? So moving away from a model where for a primary student, you're taking an average of everything they've done throughout the grading period. Instead, what you're doing is you're really thinking about what can they do now, right? And thinking about it through that lens. So it's more of a mastery based, what have they mastered at this point? Grades have to consider the use and purpose of our diagnostic testing, our formative testing, and our summative assessment. So really kind of parsing out and thinking about the difference of assessment that's of learning versus assessment that's for learning, right? We're not going to give our students a grade on something we just taught them 5 minutes ago and factor that into a report card grade. Instead, we're really going to think about that as how do we then respond through instruction based on that information so that by the end of that grading period, we're really able to evaluate what our students can do. We know that grades, especially for our youngest learners, have to separate academics from academic behaviors. So the best way I can give you this is where we start thinking more about, okay, what are their reading skills versus their compliance with completing a reading log, right? We can all relate to the reading log discussion, right? It's like, what are the reading skills versus that reading log and jumping through the hoops, right? You know, those compliance pieces and conformity are important skills that you kind of got to learn in life in some ways, but we don't want grades, especially at the primary level, to reflect that. We want it to reflect what they know in their learning. And then finally, and this one's really important, students must have the opportunity to take teacher feedback and improve their work through multiple iterations. If we are communicating to students that what they have learned is really the most important thing, we have to give them the practice and opportunity to take feedback, which we know has huge impact on student learning. But we've got to teach them to actually take that feedback, do something with it, and improve their work. And we know that when we give them those opportunities, great learning happens. And so those are really the things we keep coming back to as a primary team. So really, as we developed the primary report card, we really wanted to make sure that we had a comprehensive package for our parents that would come home 3 times a year to really show students overall progress in relationship to where they are, what they're working on, okay? And with that, we knew it was going to be really important to align the various pieces of information. So you're going to notice that we're talking about doing this 3 times rather than 4. And that is because it aligns our benchmark reporting period with our report cards. And sometimes what has inadvertently happened is that benchmark time and report card time, those don't line up. And we sometimes get different pieces of information that we aren't then able to synthesize together into a cohesive, coherent package for our families. So we're really hoping to streamline this and make sure that we are giving information that is a comprehensive overview. So you're going to see here that we would be aligning our benchmark reports with our report cards, which are the part where we would give a comment on progress that's being made toward the standards. And then finally, you'll see here where we'd be talking about those engaged learner characteristics. And so that is pulling together and thinking about those academic behaviors that would be reported on separately within the report card, but not really embedded in the actual grade level standards. Okay. So you'll see here that we've got an overview of kind of what's our old practice versus our new practice. And up here at the top, you'll see on the left our old practices. And the first 2 bullets really just talk about how we're currently marking report cards. So on the K2 report card, it might be reading, and we would mark it either satisfactory, progressing, needs improvement, right, for K2. And so that's a really broad statement, reading, right? Like, what about reading? So in 3rd and 4th grade, it's the same thing, but we've moved to those traditional letter grades, A, B, C, D. In the new report card, it will be consistent marking K4, but it will be broken down to actually priority standards that really give more detail and more information. Rather than just reading, it's going to break it down into like those key components of reading that help set students up for success in what's ahead. So we'll be able to give information about whether they're meeting the standard, progressing toward the standard, or have some limited understanding of the standard. The grades that we'll be reporting, or that we have been reporting, have been just broad subject areas. So reading, math, etc. This one is the new report card is really going to break that down into the priority standards, and they're written in parent-friendly language. So it's going to give a whole lot more information about what's coming through those report cards. Our old practices, if you look here on the left, had multiple opportunities where reports were coming home, but sometimes those reports weren't lining up. So we would give benchmark reports, interim reports, report cards, intervention plans, reports. And what we were hearing from our families is that it was a lot of great communication, but they were having trouble connecting those pieces of communication to one another. So what we're really working to do is make sure that our new reports are aligned and give students and their parents a comprehensive look at the student's overall growth and achievement 3 times per year. It's going to then align the benchmark data and classroom performance. They're also going to be combined so that the information would have a narrative piece at the end where the teacher will write a narrative, really synthesizing and interpreting all of that information together for families so that they get a clear statement of where that student's current progress is happening. So a nice cohesive package. We're excited about that.
One good question before you go.
Yeah.
You mentioned the academic performance and then the academic characteristics were separate, but that narrative will include the assessment on the performance across all these indicators, but also some of the academic characteristics.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I think, if you think about it like this, right, you might say, we might have a student that is showing us on their benchmark assessments that they are really excelling, right? We have some kiddos that are in the 99th percentile, meaning they're outperforming 99% of all other students in their same grade across the nation, okay? But the work that they're doing in the classroom isn't showing that level of performance, right? That's more of an engaged learner characteristic, right? And showing, hey, this child is just not working to their potential, but I've got all this data that shows that they are very capable of this. Okay, so it allows us to pull all of that information together. So this is just a look at how we'll be marking the report cards. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you an example. But what will happen is we will actually be giving parents the MAP report along with the report card, okay? So on MAP, the MAP scores are given to us as a RIT score, and then that RIT score is then translated into a percentile ranking. Sometimes our families get that and they're like, well, I don't really know what you mean by 75th percentile or 40th percentile. Like, what does that mean? How do I break that down to something usable for me? And what we're going to do is we're going to report the RIT score, and then we're going to give them a benchmark level. The student was above benchmark, meaning they were 76th percentile or higher. At the benchmark, on watch, meaning we're keeping our eye on them. They're still at benchmark, but we're keeping our eye on them. And then below benchmark, meaning there's somebody that we're doing some intensive intervention and really keeping a close eye on. But then in addition to that, we'll have the performance level key, and this is where we will report on the standards. So for each individual standard that we're reporting on, and I'll show you some examples in just a minute, we'll be able to say where they are in relationship to mastery of that standard. So let's take a quick look at an example. This is an example from first grade math. So up at the top, you'll see there where it gives you a place we're going to report the RIT score for math, and then the benchmark level. So going back here, we would give the RIT score, and then we would say, are they at, above, below, or on watch? Okay. But then if you get down in here, you're going to see some of our domains. So operations and algebraic thinking. Well, then we're going to break that down and say, I'm going to go right to fluently adds within 20. Okay. What our teachers will do is they'll be working on that throughout the entire trimester. And then their students will have some sort of assessment, some way of showing whether or not they've mastered that. It would be common across the grade level. And then they would be marking that. So rather than just getting a B in math or a P in math, we're really going to break it down by these individual skills and standards and give parents information about where their child is really excelling and where they need some extra help. Now, it's important to note, these are not all of our first grade math standards. One of the hardest parts of this process this year was for our teachers to really whittle this down to a meaningful and manageable number of priority standards that were going to give us the most bang for our buck in terms of communication that helps us to move our students forward. So that's a math example. You'll see that we have the same thing for our special areas. And what I love about this is it's really going to help our parents get an idea of the kinds of things that our students are doing in art, music, PE, and Spanish, because it's different in each grade level. They have their own set of standards. So you're going to see some differences in the progression of that. And then here are those engaged learner characteristics. And we were really careful to use that wording because it aligns beautifully with our Wyoming attributes of a learner, really thinking about those characteristics that help students be ready to learn in our classrooms. And then finally, just wanted to make sure that I touched on how we're going to be going about rolling this out and what it'll look like in a package that comes out to our families. The standards-based report card will come home, like I said, 3 times this year, and you'll see the dates there. That those will go home in our Thursday folders. So we'll get one in October, one in February, one in May. And it'll, in that package, parents will receive the standards-based report card, including comments from the classroom teacher that kind of summarizes the key takeaways and actionable goals for each child. Along with that, they'll receive their math report. So the family report that summarizes how they did on that math assessment will be in that same package. For students that are on a reading improvement and monitoring plan, or RIMP, that document would come in there. Students that have a WEP for gifted, with their WEP would be included there. Any special education reports, injury reports, intervention reports, all of that stuff that gives you that comprehensive look would come home in one organized package on those dates.
Wow.
So that 3 times a year, you get this nice package to go over that shows you, hey, here's how my child is doing in this grade level. Now, how are we going to onboard people to this, right? Because we have had the same report card in place for more than 20 years here in the primary. And we are actually the last primary school in the area to move to a standards-based report card. And so we know we're going to have to do some parent education and training to make sure that we help them be ready for this. And so we will be doing presentations to our parents in multiple ways. We're going to be talking to parents in person on September 19th and 21st. At 6:30 p.m. They'll have an option for either of those in-person sessions where we're really going to present the rationale and the structure of the report cards to our families. And we'll have teachers actually up there kind of helping parents interpret and see how this is laid out and why. But in addition to that, we're also going to create a series of asynchronous tools that parents can log on to our website, click on a short video, watch it, and get what they need in case they can't come to those in-person meetings. And so those will be posted on our website and shared out via newsletters and I'm imagining social media as we get closer to our first report card time. And then for teacher support, we're going to be providing them support all throughout the year. That'll really be a focus for our building leadership team and our grade level team meetings to really make sure that we're all on the same page and supporting one another and learning and growing through this process. So that's it. Do you have any questions? It's a lot.
Yes, it's not it. That's multiple years of
Yeah.
work. And thank you for bringing it all together and making it come to life.
It's been a lot of fun to do it. Our teachers are so excited.
Oh, good.
If you went up to any primary teacher right now and said, what are you most excited about this year? They would tell you the standards-based report card. They are so excited.
I think, as like a parent, I would love to know some of those things I might work on with my child if they needed some extra help. And I would imagine, I'm glad they're excited because it seems like a lot of extra work per kid, for the teachers,
But here's the thing, they're doing that work anyway. This is just gonna really give them the avenue to really get that information to our families. And I think they're hungry for that. Because our report cards sometimes feel a little anticlimactic, right?
yeah.
You've got all this data for this kid and you just say like, B. Right, it gives a lot more substance to it and we already have it, so we might as well report it. Yeah.
And the total package, like for it to come all at the same time, because you're right, you just inevitably get your things at different times. And I've heard so many questions of people trying to connect what each one means. So for them to get those together, I think is wonderful. And just to relay like, it's changing for K-4, but when they get to middle school, they're still getting the 4 times. Like, I understand that when people have kids in primary and middle or high, it might get confusing of why they're coming differently.
Absolutely. And we've thought a lot about that and thought about how we manage that for our students, especially in 4th grade. And so some of the things that our 4th grade teachers are going to be doing is actually helping their students understand how you get averages, right? So they begin using spreadsheets, more paper pencil, and they actually do math with them, right? Where they're actually tracking, here's the grade I got on each of these things. Now, every week or 2, we stop and I want you to figure out your average, right? They're starting to transition them by just helping them to see what's coming. And here's how that's calculated. They want them to understand the math behind it too. And so we're thinking a lot about that, particularly with our 4th graders, about how do we get them ready for that change that's coming at the middle school while still honoring what needs to happen for them developmentally as primary students.
I had 2 things, not issues at all, but as you do the communication, your slide on what we used to do and what the value is.
Yeah.
A lot of important content there. One question for me is, how do we summarize for the parents when we do the communication?
Yeah.
These are the 3 reasons why this is better for you.
Yeah.
These are the 3 reasons why it's better for your child.
Yep.
Because there's a lot
I
of
love
good
that.
benefit there, and just kind of
Yeah.
helping that be obvious as they go through what those differences are. It may be helpful when you talk about 20 years having done it the way that we've done it.
Right.
There'll be some people who only seen it that way. And
Right.
this is better in many ways, but change may just kind of have people be like, I don't know if I like this. And so helping is
Exactly.
one question. But then you think about standard-based grading. We're doing it K-4 because our elementary is set that way. As we think about the district, is this something that's better for us to think about at 5th and or 6th grade as well? And we just looked at it at elementary because that's the way our divisions are set? Or at what level does this approach not add the same value and it isn't still the best way to do it, right? Is that 4th grade or is it 5th grade or 6th grade? What do we know about?
I mean, I was part of the CAC group that studied this, and I can tell you the research that we found was really all over the place. There's supports for it through 8th grade. There's supports for it through 3rd grade. So you can find research to align with any of that. I think it depends too on just your setup and the culture of the district and all of those pieces.
Yeah, I think it'll be very helpful to reflect on the experience this year, next year, and to continue to think about that, because that very question was part of that CAC conversation. And there was lots of conversation on what makes sense. I think the natural way is by building now to get it off and running in a good way, and then think about, are there other future impacts to it? Yeah, that's a good question.
Will you do some follow-up with the parents after these come out? Because your example was very telling to me, the one about a student who consistently maybe pulls A. But when we go into this, we suddenly see, well, there are some concerns here. There are some where the child is excelling here. And I think sometimes for the parents, that will be a whole new opportunity to look at their child's growth.
I think so too, right? Because even our students that have straight A's all have their areas that are maybe a little more challenging for them. And this will kind of uncover some of that and help, and we'll have good conversations throughout that. But I definitely think parent feedback is going to be a critical piece of this, right? After we go through the first round of this in the fall, maybe getting parent feedback, doing some sort of survey. We have to think more about how that's going to look exactly, but definitely want to get parent feedback along the way. maybe after we've done it after each trimester,
Mm-hmm.
or at the end of the year, just some different thoughts. So if you have opinions about that or how that would be for best, we would be really open to that. Because we want to make sure that we're honoring their user experience with the package we're sending home. And making sure that it really is information that is manageable, meaningful, and understandable to our families.
And some explanation if you're gonna be following up with intervention or how that intervention will look,
Absolutely,
tier 1, tier 2.
absolutely.
Well, and we do have conferences that soon follow after
Yes,
this, first package.
And then
Aren't we
Artley.
gonna do a
We're talking about those, what those options might look like this year.
so we actually, when we thought about the dates, we thought about lining it up to make sure that we would have our benchmarking finished for first,
Right.
second, and third
Okay.
benchmark window. But that we would also have it so that report cards would be in our families' hands before conferences, so that they would have some time to digest that and come to conferences with that information, ready to have dialogue with the teacher. The other thing I wanted to point out is you'll notice that our last report card actually goes home, the Thursday before May 8th. So we still have.
Which is
a few
effectively the
days-
end of the year. Like, the end of the
Well,
focus.
we did that intentionally because with the standards-based report card, right, the learning is still happening, right? And all
Correct.
that last week, we're not gonna take exams for a first grader, right? We're
Right,
able to
right.
comment at that point. But it gives our families some time where the teachers are still in the building. They can still have conversations with the teacher rather than it being something that gets mailed out after the school year is gone and maybe teachers are off on vacation. Because we really want these to provoke good conversation and dialogue between teachers and parents.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thanks to the whole group for.
Yeah. Oh, they
Um,
worked
work
so
Do
hard.
thank your committee, because I
Oh,
know
a
they
lot.
literally put years into this, plus
Mhm.
we have the whole parent committee that helped with the CAC study, so we have a lot of people to thank.
Yes.
And it's
we were
really a
very
great
lucky.
example of the CAC really finding opportunities and then the school
And carrying.
team carrying the baton and moving forward with it, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gina.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you. We will move on to board committee reports. Although we're gonna kind of buzz through it being summer. So there was no finance committee meeting. I'm gonna take the citizens advisory and kind of group it in the superintendent committee liaison reports with belonging in committee because the belonging committee and the CAC have not met, but we have been
Right.
active.
Yes, well, and so we had application process, the application process posted over the summer, so that actually closes today. And so the next step is for board representatives on each one of those teams to pull together. And we'll be scheduling meetings in the next week or two to have those conversations to go over membership, make plans for the meetings for the duration of the school year. So that's the next step.
So moving along.
Yep.
Okay. The facility, oh, no, I'm sorry, community engagement. Let's talk about that. Not tons happening in the summer. There was a game on Sunday. The alumni girls played the double current girls in soccer. I only got to see a small part of it, but they were, those alumni.
I didn't see the final score. I only saw the first
I
one.
know.
I think
saw the end of the
was
boys' game.
4-2, wasn't it? Alumni didn't, alumni lost.
Yeah, it was 3-1.
But they were trying
Yeah.
hard. They didn't want to be.
Great.
It was great. Is there anything else in community engagement?
Lots coming.
A lot's
Oh,
coming. I just have,
I-
we just have, so these are some school things, some city things. I had, correct me if any of these are wrong, but, these are fun things that are coming up this week and next week. So we've got the high school painting palooza. So this is the park activations that are happening. And there is a tremendous display of talent when that comes. So that's tomorrow. That starts tomorrow, yes. We have our new staff orientation coming up on Wednesday. We're excited about that. Primary, new student welcome nights are the second, third, and fourth. We have our ninth grade student orientation coming up later this week on the third. The city has the end of summer celebration. I think that's this Friday on the fourth. fifth grade strings roundup coming up on the seventh, staff opening days on the 8th and 9th, and goodness, the 10th is the first day of school, so here we go. Yep.
School year has started, and thank you, for the calendar online,
Mhm.
and we are.
Hopefully
Yes,
we'll
but we
go
know
better
what
this
happens.
year
when
than
it
last year.
goes.
So I'm hopeful, but it's lagging.
And it's been there for
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah. It's the same thing that happened last year. Well, I'm hopeful that it's not the same. Last year, they lost the pallet.
That's-
And so it took a long time for them to even find them again. That is not, so far, we're not into that time frame where they're thinking they lost anything yet. So I'll keep an eye
Take a
on it.
rush for you to go.
But it is all ongoing. All of it.
Absolutely, and it's quite helpful on that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
They're on like papers.
We should go door to door.
Streets.
Yes, we should.
The worksheet too, I think we're gonna speak a little bit to the communications audit. And providing some highlights from that information and how we'll continue to work forward with that.
Great. So within our communication and partnership pillar, one of our goals of the past year was to conduct a communication audit.
Correct.
We plan to use the feedback from the audit to improve or build new communication structures that strengthen the partnership with our students, families, and community members. And our staff members. That was an important stakeholder group that we also reached out to during that.
Mhm.
So I'll share a little information about the work that was done today, to date, its purpose, and some immediate next steps. We will continue to be digging into this information, for probably a couple of years, there are very specific, recommendations, and then there's some, things to look into that over a long time period we might be applying. So, we partnered with Hamilton County Educational Service Center on this. So HCESC designed the audit to assess the effectiveness of our school district's current communication efforts, solicit opinions, concerns, and perceptions of parents, community members, and staff members of the district's current communication efforts, and provide recommendations for strategies and tactics for enhancing communication at the building and district level. So that's pretty much where we were looking. We were not going to teacher-student communication or teacher-family communication with this audit.
Okay.
So the audit began in February and continued through March. They hosted 3 in-person focus groups for students, staff, and community members. They conducted online Google surveys distributed by email, through our email system and through the city newsletter. And then they reviewed printed material and district and building emails, social media pages, and websites. With those items, they evaluated them on effectiveness of message delivery, readability, visual appeal, and engagement. So the next steps will be, we've received the report and we've kind of dug into it. We're continuing to process things, and we'll be continuing to build on the feedback, but there are some overarching themes and then some immediate, like, low-hanging fruit that I think that we can jump into immediately. Some of the identified strengths included our weekly principal newsletters, the monthly superintendent update, the Thursday folder system at the primary schools, and the visual appeal of our print pieces. But the growth opportunities, some of the things that we will be working on this year include, one of the overarching things was an improved website. So specifically, the feedback that we received said it needs to be easier to navigate. It should be a one-stop shop with all the information kind of gathered there and then pushed out from there through other tools, but all collected in one place. And it should be more mobile friendly. Another overarching theme was a written communication plan. So to produce a written plan, a document that is shareable and that outlines the tools we use, which audiences they reach, and the cadence that people can expect them. So based on the audit feedback received about how respondents receive information and how they want to receive information, email will continue to be an important tool in the plan. 87% of respondents said that email was their preferred method of receiving information from the district.
80%?
87%.
87%.
Yeah. Which is shocking, because I feel like people get.
Right.
Well,
I wouldn't
get one.
If it comes to you,
But it doesn't matter, you can find it, you can
Size
search
of
it, research it.
Yeah, and you can keep.
yeah.
And one of the things that one of my beliefs regarding communication is, right now, with so many different social media platforms and so many different ways in texting, I think people just feel like the one thing they're certain about is that they're missing something. So I really do believe in identifying, when possible, a single, like, communication tool where you're really sharing, where everybody knows where to look.
Yeah.
And then, so we use email in that way. You know, so some things are gonna be more appropriate through email as much as possible. That will also be on the website. Social media, the way that we use that is just kind of for access, to push things out, to drive traffic back to that information on the website.
Right.
And then just for some additional things that it's not gonna be a big deal if people miss.
Yeah.
Or resharing things from our support organizations or things like that, that they're pushing out on those platforms that don't really live somewhere else. So social media, we will very likely continue to use social media. But that we did hear through the audit that respondents prefer some social media platforms over others. Specifically, the majority of respondents use Facebook. And the second most widely used platform was Instagram. So Facebook was about 67% of respondents use Facebook and about 47. Only 20% of respondents use Twitter or X at this point. And only 2.9% of respondents preferred to receive most of their district information through that channel. So what I see, that's the way we use that, I think it's pretty effective in athletics. I think people are looking there for it. And it is like both for celebrating student success. I believe that colleges kind of look there too. And for, minute by minute updates. I don't see another tool. So I wouldn't be recommending probably taking athletics off Twitter at all. Like that seems to be an effective tool. There is a question in my mind about district living on Twitter or what exactly we look like there. So I think that might be some longer term thinking that we might want to do about strategically thinking about where we live on social media. So that leads us into, so generally speaking about social media, I think I'd like to identify and focus on our most effective platforms, and then provide guidelines for users about using those platforms. I think we need to identify all the school accounts that we have for all of those. I think we can do some more consistent naming around them so people can find them better. I think there are things, and also protect our staff members so that they understand legally what needs to be done with putting out school communication. So I think we have an opportunity for a lot of improvement in social media. I think that might be over time. That's a big chunk, I think. Based on the feedback we received, we'd like to expand our content. So all of these communication tools, I think it would be great if we had more information and stories focused on the success and accomplishments of our students and staff members. I think that's, we've got huge opportunities there. We also heard that respondents want more information and reminders about upcoming events. So we know that we know that parents know that principals are sending out weekly messages. So it would be fairly easy to add this week's events, to the bottom of that.
Right.
Different things that we can be doing to just remind people that of when events are coming up. We'd also like to continue to grow structures to reach community members who do not currently have students in school. And our plan to do this would be to continue to expand awareness of our Cowboy Club and our Golden Cowboy Club and use those networks, and also send at least 3 printed pieces emailed to every household annually. Make sure that we're reaching people there, because we do reach people with mail that we don't reach through we don't have other tools that are readily available. One of the things that I've seen recently with that is when we sent the mail regarding the Cowboy Club and the Golden Cowboy Club, we had really good response.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that, with the response from that mailing.
Yeah, I mean, we're at about right now, our Golden Cowboy Club prior to the push starting in May, let's say April and May, we had about 25 email addresses in the database. Some of those are to the same household, some of those are different, so I can't say household, but I can just say the number of email addresses. We're now at about 125. And our Cowboy Club is pretty much zero. I mean, it may have been like one, there might have been, and now we're at about 125 also. So, and it has been nice, I think, to give people the choice. But some people seem to prefer to spell themselves cowboy single. So and that's fine if they know like which thing they're getting, what they're getting and not getting. Yeah,
So given the
I'm not carding anybody.
getting the 3 mailings versus is it an average of 1 or so today, or what would you say?
So annually, our printed pieces, historically, we've done a little bit more this year. Historically, it's been, well, when I say historically, I mean maybe the last 6 years. It's been the calendar to some extent. So I think we'd like to bulk that up and maybe do a quality profile. Like, and when we talk about mail pieces, I'm not counting postcards. You know, I'm talking about
Informational.
information about what's going on in our school. So a quality profile potentially that would go out in spring maybe, and then something in November or December that kind of bridges the calendar. Here's all the great things that are happening. Here's what we're doing now. And then, yeah.
Okay.
And then lastly, we plan to provide, and we also saw this on the audit. I'd like to provide greater assistance to get more additional parents and guardians connected to their child's school messenger profile, so that all parents are receiving the district and building the level of communication that they'd like to receive. There is a way for families to do that on their own, but it's a little arduous.
It's hard.
And over the pandemic, when we really wanted to make it as easy as possible, make sure that everybody had that, I was doing more work to help that, and it works fine. It works great. So I think I'll just always make it clear that the first step is to reach out to me. So just a little
I
more.
feel like it's, since the pandemic, just watching the number of people of all ages who are comfortable with QR codes. I mean, we could slap a sticker at you know, Black Cocoa or the pastry shop and say, do you want more information about what's happening in your school? Click here, and then that, you know, join the Cowboy Club or whatever. Like, I feel like there's so many new tools that people of all ages are more comfortable with than they were before. You know, I certainly, you know, I'm thinking about facilities, excited about some of the new ways that we might be able to more broadly reach people than we would have thought before.
Absolutely.
I was saying, I know you've been talking about the website for a bit, so I'm gonna like kind of knowing it, but it will be great because then I think we all get different questions. And you try really hard to be proactive with communication, but then if it all really is landing easier to find, there's less misinformation, right? And less or more people coming to us asking versus creating.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nice things that happen on Facebook that I see on Facebook or different things where people reshare very easily. When they have the information, somebody just share the link.
And that's, and then we don't have the misinformation.
Yeah, I think what's hard is when somebody puts out on Facebook something that, hey, what about this? And it's totally wrong. And then it gets lost and somewhere the right information might appear, but then it's gotten lost in the swirl. I think that's a challenge for everyone, for sure.
They come up more in different projects and relevant to see where, but per some of the questions around what has been done with the feedback from the previous, like what's going to be the opportunities to input and sort of sharing of the next steps. Of the many good things you said about how we'll do communications, which of them do you think would be most helpful as we're keeping the community connected on the whole primary discussion? Like which of those elements would be most valuable and that we're planning to include in our approach?
So I'm not certain that the website will be complete in time, you know, I think, so it won't be that.
It won't be a new website.
It won't be as easy.
Right, yeah,
won't
it won't be the new and improved website,
Right.
but we will definitely be using the website. I mean, I think having a place where those things land, and we see that, I think, with the belonging work and the big work in our different committees. So making sure that we can find the information on the website. And having it maybe on the homepage, like above the fold in the header gallery, so it's as one click as possible. I think that the website's gonna be the best place for that.
We've also talked about when critical, when needed, how do we reach every household? We're having that conversation today, and when will mailers be used to make sure that everyone has access to upcoming information? And it's likely that will drive someone to our website, but just to make sure that people know what's there and how to access it. Some other avenues, but that's a key one.
Yeah, the use of mailers has been good over this past year. We had a lot of from,
For staff.
substitutes, yeah, but a number of things that those offices more.
Is it too soon to know? I know last time you had to do the website, we had a projected timeline and then it hit.
Yeah, I'm not,
But
certain.
do you have a
It's very slow going right now, so, it won't be sooner than September, it could be December. I hate to like
Okay,
put that
somewhere in
kind of, yeah.
Person.
Yeah.
And it's, you need, the people in the district to provide feedback and to go back and forth and build that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do when we're not in session.
Yeah.
Because we need everyone who's connected to that website to help build that. So, our key is to do the staff to just within the time that people are here.
All right, good.
I'm sorry. but,
No.
Well, per your discussion about how people have a sense when there's information in all the places that they're missing the thing. How do we communicate to people that it's the website and that's where it all is and everything that we're communicating is there so that there's not misinformation or confusion or lack of clarity?
And I think it's pretty easy to add a sentence or two to any communication that goes out, just to explain that. I mean, last summer or through COVID or different things, I was adding a couple sentences that said, information you need to know will be in your inbox, extra information, these are our Facebook thing, so I think it can be, just like guidelines within an email, you want to keep them as short as possible, but yeah, I think, for all the information and for additional information. Another thing that I think works well here is that we're doing a lot of email communication, we're also doing kind of a layered communication approach, so that email that you receive is almost like a cover letter with links. Because some people just want the bits, you're just, and that's all you're gonna get, but then some people think they haven't gotten enough, so you want to layer it, so there are multiple, one entry level, I guess, but different opportunities for that. So that, and all of those links will go to the website.
And we've seen that in action, so I think you're thinking the communications audit did indeed reflect what we have seen. No, it's welcome to this room. All right, thank you. Is there anything else? The next group would be the facility committee. I know the superintendent's facility committee has been busy this summer, so
Yep.
we want to
We'll
wait
get
and
into the-
put
yeah,
that
the board
later, all
report.
right, as we get down. Planning and goal setting has not met. The policy review committee did not meet, although there is a policy on a first read, and I'll explain that in just a second. And student achievement has not met. All right, Board of Education report. The first is a policy, it's 5420, it's a standing policy, but it has been updated to reflect primary changes. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, there's corresponding NGs, and you know, how to do what approved, but those are, I know, in the process of being updated.
You have to update this as well. Okay, all right. So this is a first read for that policy. We will accept it next month. And then our second thing is the pre-bond service agreement with, you want to take over here at this
Yeah,
point?
I'll give some background. Kara, Heather, Mike, all members of the superintendent facilities committee.
Yes, and thank you for all your work.
Join in, stop me if there's anything that you all would like to add. So first of all, the work to set a path for the future of our primary schools continued over the summer. And so that started with June 2nd. On June 2nd, we did post an RFP, request for proposals. From that, we received 5 proposals. And then that team, our superintendent facilities team, made up of 2 board members, treasurer, Bryce not with us tonight, the facilities administrator, and the superintendent evaluated those proposals, those 5 that came in. 3 firms were selected to schedule interviews with, again, with that team, the superintendent facilities team. Those were SHP, MSA, and Richley. All great organizations, all very qualified to do the work. And so we held conversations with each one of those firms. From the review of the original proposals, interviews with those teams, previous work that's been done within Wyoming City Schools or other districts that was highlighted in some of their information. We're excited to be at a point where we're recommending Richley Architects to continue the critical work of our primary facilities. A little bit of background on that decision. Richley has had a positive experience with Wyoming City Schools, looking back to the middle school and the process that was used within the middle school. In that process, there was a high importance placed on community engagement, and it was identified as critical to that process. There were various viewpoints that were pulled together in that process, and they engaged the school community to arrive at a plan to move forward. There was an incredible amount of community support for that plan. I believe at the time it was the highest passage rate of any option put forward, bond issue put forward. And so we're looking for that same level of commitment to community engagement as part of this process. Specifically in our conversations, they provided a clear plan that outlined the critical work that needs to be done. That included a review of all of the work that has been done already, and a review of all of the feedback that we've received, which is critical. It included the development of additional options and costs that come with each one of those options as reflected from the feedback. So spoke specifically about the need to develop an option that continued to use all of our three primary buildings as part of that conversation. Just as an example of using that feedback that we received. They spoke to the need for the high level of engagement of our community on factors that should be considered when potential options are explored, and the embedded communication tools that will help us understand the entire Wyoming school community perspective as we start thinking about moving down from multiple options ultimately down to one. So those are a few of the pieces. Kara, if you want to speak to any of the other thoughts that we have.
Yeah, a couple of things I really liked about Richley. They have strong partnerships with Moats Engineering as well as the Kleinger's Group. And both of those groups have done a lot of work with community engagement in our community already. So I think that's really important. Throughout the spring, when we were doing the community conversations, we were asked a lot about the geotechnical survey. Like, had there been that survey done? And they were really the only group that said, we need to do that, right away. And they have a strong partnership with CTL to do this work. And that was part of their plan. Their experience in this master planning phase that we consider kind of like phase 2, initial concept, listen to the community, retooling. And I think their experience with other like districts, Indian Hill, Madeira, Oakwood, it just really spoke to the strengths that they have in coming to Wyoming. We were fortunate to interview 3 really good groups, but they just rose to the top for those reasons. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I'm saying, well, we talked a lot about with communication too, and what does that look like, and knowing that we are somewhat limited with our, people power. And so they used Paul Fallon, who's the communication expert that we've also used before. So we were talking about that, not only is Richley wonderful, interview well, but that they're experts that we could get information on was what we needed, like where we are and what we needed, and looking back at everything the community has been saying and putting back in different options, knowing where we're, like, knowing all the information we've already gathered and knowing where we want to move forward with it. So just with those in addition was great. And like as Kara said, 3 great interviews with different people, brought different positive things. But with the history too, it's great.
Yeah, and Mike virtually is here. I don't know if you want to speak for, well, sure, a second.
I think so.
Just make it.
Yeah.
My name is Mike Birchley, president of Birchley Architects. And Jean, it's nice to see you.
You know,
After 2 years.
Earlier this evening, there was a comment about the middle school. You and I are probably the only people in this room who can answer every question on that one.
So it's great to be back. I did spend between 2008 and 2014 sweating it out with this community and a project that we all know we're proud of. So
Absolutely.
we're honored to be considered to move forward with this next phase. We're humbled by the task that's before us. There's been a lot of tremendous work that's been done today. We want to build off of that. Our just a super high level overview is we're proposing to be decided in detail. Do a listening session in August where we just open it up. We're not presenting options, but we're truly receiving public information, getting up to speed while we're assessing. And then in September, we're proposing to go back with our first community forum. And at this forum is when options will be presented. And it's likely options will be presented are options that you consider to date. We're also have to hold open the possibility that we might have some new creative possibilities and ideas for you. So that'll happen in September. We will get feedback from that session. We will listen at that session. And then we'll follow up in October with community forum number 2. And we'll say for these options, this is what we heard. This is how we define them. We could be adding options in October, we could be deleting options in October. And then that'll be followed up by a statistically valid survey from Paul Fallon that we'll do. One of the challenges with the community forums and challenges with communications is, are you truly hearing a statistically valid representation of what you're saying?
Right.
So in this November timeframe, our hope is to present to the board some facts, either in option or options that have garnered the most community support. We always hope for unanimity around it, but that's what we'll be working towards. So with that, that'll put the board in a position at that time frame to consider a go, no go for March. Yes, sir.
During the discussions, helpful, clarity, lots of really good things. Came in with some notes relative to things thought were important relative to how we engage the full community on these options. But as you think about September, on the elementary school initiative, there will be some asynchronous ways that people can engage with the content of the discussion. So I don't know if we're having one session in September or multiple, or how do we allow people who aren't present or available on any given night to engage is a question. I'm not worried that will be included, but an idea about that. But I thought what I heard you say too, that we begin to get the statistically valid response from the entire community. It will show what the options are that we're asking people to give feedback on, that will include some sense for cost and other implications associated with those options that allows them to respond. I'm checking all this as we go.
Yes.
And that within one of those options that are presented to people, at least one of them will have Elm as an elementary school. And that's a guarantee, like that's a given.
Yeah.
Is that a question?
It is a question.
Yeah.
It is a
What we
question.
talked about.
I'm checking on it. It's pretty important for me. I'm just-
It's a
yeah.
given. It's a given for all of us. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but based on some past work we've done to prep for things in the future, I can see that as a very strong possibility.
So I will, so a few things that are some of the next steps that people want to know about. And we have really had an opportunity to talk too much about this, but going back to the feedback that we heard, we know that one of the first steps we need to take soon is to create a new steering committee that will guide the work. And that's to really gain feedback from. And so we know that needs to be representative geographically of our entire district. And so we heard that, we know that team has to be developed, and that's a diverse committee, educators, parents, community members, city officials, you know, just to make sure that we have the perspectives of our entire Wyoming community. So that's a big deal with this work.
Can I just say real quick too, we were talking about the numbers too, just so you know that, like, and that was helpful for you too, like, what's too big? Like, what's a good that's, diverse enough with still being manageable to do the work. So that was something that we talked a lot about.
We talked about, doing a review of our current sites, thinking about the geotechnical assessments that would need to happen to make sure that we have that information early on. Developing options based on that previous feedback. And we talked about that feedback loop, and you spoke to that, I think, when you talked about, developing options, go out to the community, come back and revise those options. Well, that's where that new team will come in, to be a critical piece of reflecting on that feedback and helping to inform the work. That team, our facilities team, the board, multiple iterations of conversations. And we even talked too about having some ongoing opportunity for people to ask frequent, questions that come up throughout this whole process. And we talked about setting up a system where we have weekly opportunities for people to just pop in and get the true details of what's happening with this work. That's not totally established, but that's something that we're interested in doing.
So we're thinking like if it was a committee member and a board member, maybe administrator, that opportunity maybe once a week at Waikato or, at some other location. Where we
Gathering
just,
places within the.
that we just, it's outside of the formal committee per se, but it could be a place where people just come and say, what's the latest? Or I heard this and what do you know? And if it's a question we can't answer, we bring it back. It could become part of the ongoing information that's given to that larger committee, and to you all.
Yeah, we were talking about it in FAQ too.
Yeah,
Just to
We would
create
build
that.
on that.
Well, and one of the things that will be coming out soon then is to help develop this new committee. We want to make sure that people have access to if I want to be part of that, how do I know how to be part of that? And so similar to our CAC, similar to our Belonging Inclusion Collaborative, we'll put that out there and make sure everybody's aware of that so that people who are interested can say, I want to be interested and be considered for that, so that we can make sure that we've got our community represented.
But what else I liked about you when we interviewed your place was just that you came with a unique idea. Like you didn't have to do that, but part of it was just to show that you are able to expand the thinking of what we were even thinking with what it went up there. Like that, with VSWC, we already had whatever, 21 options that maybe we had whittled down, and it was really kind of not one that's necessarily going to be presented everywhere, but just to show some expanded thinking of other ways, what have we thought about in the community. So that was part of it in the interview process that I found hopeful and helpful, and knowing that you've engaged the community so much in the past and knew what the community kind of needed. But to get back to your question real quick, I knew we talked about it, but just to make sure we've all talked about it, as at the proper time would have the coordinating cost. It's not right away because you have to come up with the proper option. But we said what's important for the entire community is to know when you end up voting on something, how much is it? What does this mean? If I like option A, how much is it? What do you get? What don't you get? Eventually, down the road, not right away.
And that's what I'm saying, by the time you're asking for a statistically valid sort of response, will that response include that level of data so people can respond with knowledge about what the cost of plan A, B, or C would be?
Yes.
That's
Yeah, it won't be bond knowledge, possibly just be.
Yeah.
Total project.
Total,
Yeah.
Human numbers, right, understandable by
Human numbers are better.
non-financial people.
Yeah.
Right, because we have a number of different options, but as I talked to some of the people this summer, I've tried to get to as many people as have asked me to talk to them and that I would like to talk to them and get to them. I keep coming upon people who really, there's going to be a bottom line. I mean, Hamilton County is getting its property reevaluated this week, or this, we should be getting our letters very soon. We should have already gotten them. There is that that's going to make a difference. There are a number of people who are new to the community who've not actually had a bond levy that they've had to, they don't know the difference and need to understand the operating levy that is also a part of the regular life cycle of a school district. So there will have to be some cost conversations at some point because some people are basing their decision on that.
I was thinking about you all and your work on the middle school and thinking about in years past when the first discussions of how should we renovate the middle school? And I think it's interesting to look at a timeline and see it was put out there.
Years.
There was a brouhaha over whether it should be renovated or completely torn down. And then, so that kind of put a halt, and it's kind of a, maybe not quite the same way, but kind of a retooling of like, we'll think about this another day.
Mm-hmm.
And then they came back to it also post-recession.
In 2008.
Yeah, so it was kind of bad timing that it was all launched to begin with, but in the end, like when I looked more closely at that project, I saw some things that I think really the community workshopping idea and having people input into the options, I think is gonna be great. Something we can do in phase 2.
You have to start with something. You have to have an opening conversation. And I think in both the middle school and the primary, we have done the opening. And now we do the conversations that lead to options, and then somewhere down the line are designs. We're not designing them. We're optioning. And then later on, we go into the building. That's farther down.
I was gonna say, can we just like send out the communication to people to look at minute 55 of
I
the
know.
video from this discussion so that
Yeah.
we can have people see what the
Absolutely.
plan is, what the data is, what the clarity is, and not require a transcription of the meeting.
And then also,
Really?
I'm just getting excited. With regards to the larger committee that's gonna have geographical representation and, be more expansive. The timeline for people being able to look for an application online, is about, I know you're probably not quite, but I imagine it's very soon.
Yeah, the goal will be to get that out as soon as possible. The more challenging point is making sure that it's been out long enough so that everyone who wants to have access to that has had access to that, they've seen it and been able to respond to it. So we can get it out pretty quickly. It's just making sure that.
Yeah, of course, give people time.
Give it enough
Yeah.
time.
So I was thinking all the learning weapons or communications on it, like,
I mean,
best way to make sure
If we
everybody
had
sees.
enough lead time, I'd love to do a mailer,
Yeah.
get it into every person's mailbox. So that everybody,
How long a lead time do you need for a mailer?
it's much better than the calendars. It might be, I would think 3 weeks. I think it's likely 3 weeks. I can work with, we work with a great printer, but then you are dependent
It's
on.
the post office. is
I know.
The problem, because they're under no obligation.
So I mean,
Mail.
it could be 2 weeks, but I absolutely do not feel comfortable saying that.
Well, I guess it's
I would-
July 31.
You said August 31st was your deadline. 3 weeks still allows.
And you're
8 days.
still
Right, and
advertising
we're
it
doing
other
everywhere.
ways.
We're doing
Yeah.
Other places, we're putting in windows in coffee shop and we're putting on.
Oh, right, not the
newsletters.
little
It's
little
not, it's one of many
Yeah.
communication tools. But that is the one that we know we can reach the people who are not.
Right. The pockets we really are looking for too.
And the principal newsletters, now help me with this new law, the new election law, we could go ahead and, because this is a committee that's looking at options. So it would be legal to announce it through school communications as well, correct? Not anything that has to do with a bond levy down there.
So I mean, we're still waiting on that.
I know we're all still waiting, the whole of Ohio is still waiting.
Right,
yeah.
so there's always questions about that. My first read would be absolutely, but we probably want to consult a little bit just to make sure. So that would really be long.
Well, and August gives us time for if we have another listening and then the geotechnical survey, some of the legwork that needs to happen with you all.
That's true.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be,
I guess that.
the rest of the committee doesn't have to be ready by August. Okay. Yay.
Thank you. You're
Thank you.
welcome. Mike, thank you. Stay or head on home. I need a, motion to approve the Board of Education report.
So moved.
Uh-oh,
Second.
we're all excited.
Throwing off Heather.
John.
Uh-oh, okay, I got you. Okay. Call that roll, please.
Mr. Thomas? Mrs. Yee? Yes. Mrs. Zoller?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick? Yes. Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Thank you. I couldn't find a line.
All right, take a deep breath now. It's time for the treasurer's report.
Oh, okay. I'll be Rhonda for a moment.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, going to do this.
Some diverse skill.
Thank you. All right, treasurer's report. You can see we're approving the minutes from the following board meeting, the regular meeting from June the 29th and the special meeting from July the 17th. On here is to approve the statement of revenues and expenditures for the month ending June 30th, 2023. Donations with gratitude. We have money from the Wyoming School Foundation, from the Lynn Family Education Fund to go toward unpaid lunch balances for students on reduced lunch. I really love to see them.
Every year, thank you.
Thank you
Lynn
for-
family.
I know, it's so great that they do that. And then item D, return of advances to the general fund from, if I wrote it down, I just want to read all this number, you can see it. The ESSER funds,
You spend the ESSER funds first, then you go to the government, and then you get the money. for that.
and
So
then
this
for
is,
ESSER
this
too.
is the end of the paperwork process.
Okay, and then item E, 23-24 property and casualty insurance renewal from Liberty Mutual. Here, and before we approve it. That I can't answer?
No. I just have a question about C, actually. So what the Lynn Family Education Fund does, how would someone else in the district who had interest to do something that has some similar effect or benefit in some other space? How do they know about that? Or who would they approach if they wanted to contribute or create something?
Well, the school foundation,
Go to the.
Wow, the school
yep,
foundation.
and then
The
they,
privacy.
and then they work with the school district to say, you know, is that a need? How could we spend this? Generate ideas. Some people have very specific kind of tailored pockets that they want to use it for. Some people are very open, like I just got approached about a science one and we're exploring one in the science department that might be available with the partnership about.
But they could go to Rhonda too.
Yeah.
And she would direct.
Yeah,
them.
she would, they say when in doubt,
Correct.
sit around that, and she's
Yep.
helped with that too.
Just give me the check.
Yeah.
I'll make sure you it's the right place. I promise you I'm not doing it.
I had questions about item E, the property and casualty insurance renewal policy with Liberty Mutual.
Yeah.
Last year, this came up where we saw a 10% increase. And it was a standalone bid. I mean, it was the only contract, it was renewal of previous terms and things of that nature. So I had reached out at that time to say, you know, do we ever get into a competitive bidding kind of situation, given the size of this contract and also given some of the increases? It might be just good to do a, excuse the expression, discount, double check. And they don't, that company doesn't do these types of policies, so I'm not promoting it. To see, you know, if we're in line, I mean, to have a benchmark to measure it against. And so I reached out after that meeting and eventually heard back that, yeah, this is possible. We can do this and that things will be different this year. This current contract that we're asked to renew marks an additional 13% jump for a total of 23% in 2 years. So this contract suggests a $30,672 jump in just a 2-year period of time. That may be well within reason. That might be norm given what's happening in the insurance industry, especially the schools. I just don't know without a comparative benchmark or 2 or 3. I know, you know, just as a homeowner, if my insurance went up by 23% in 2 years, I'd be getting some competitive bids to see. So I reached out to Tim in Rhonda's absence and got some information. We wrote some things together. Some items I think are unique to Rhonda, and so we're still kind of waiting to hear back on those, particularly why we didn't see additional bids. I don't know, might be too strong a word, but at least additional items that we could at least compare to see if this is reasonable So that was my concern. And then in light of, the flight delay, whether we might want to table this particular item to get some more information where we can really size up the reasonableness of $159,366.
I think Tim does have some information he can share.
Well, just that there was so last year when the conversation happened, there was a review of the organizations that were being looked at. Not a formal process like you're speaking to, that I know of. And so I wouldn't be able to elaborate on that next level.
That's a time frame for when it needs to be approved or paid or what have you. Is there any issue? Can we even do it? Like to pull this item out of the report and approve the report, tabling that item to come back in a future meeting?
I think there has been some, you're asking me to answer for Rhonda, but I believe there has between Rhonda and our insurance broker, I think there has been
They do some
a conversation and
like,
They do that,
benchmarking.
and I just know asking around through the years, this doesn't help with the, this specific. But I feel like I go back to Rhonda a lot with things that I don't understand, and that every time I feel very comfortable. I'm not gonna articulate it as well as she does, but literally every time she explains it in a way that I know for her, she would not bring something to the table that doesn't, that she hadn't checked or rechecked or tried to get discounts on. I feel like she's so great at that. I can't speak to whether or not you like shopped around, but I feel like she always. I feel like
At that point, there was detail in the communication. I don't know if it's Tim update or somewhere that I was looking at just today that listed what the increase was, and what other choices were made on ways that we took maybe the liability, the higher deductible. To manage, the overall cost. So I took away if there were some things that were done to try to minimize what the increase was. To the extent that John's seen that though, and is interested to ask a question to understand from Rhonda just in more perspective. My question was on this agenda, is it possible for us to approve the elements of the report, save that one, and come back to that one after whatever conversations allow for Rhonda to give the detailed perspective?
I'm looking at the paperwork if there was something.
I think technically we are not, you would have to vote the whole report down,
So, and my
and then.
bigger concern is the renewal dates of August 1st.
Yeah. I don't know what the last is.
Then you might
Last
lapse
tomorrow.
it.
Well, no, I don't know that. That would be my question. I think that's what you don't
Right.
know. I hear Ilya
Lapse.
asking is where's the lapse if we don't renew it, like the insurance piece. Yeah, and I don't really understand.
I will have to pull it up.
And
I'm trying to.
there's a couple other options. I think there's a couple other questions too, because the letter we got explained some of the attempts and also the explanation of the increase was not dated. So we don't really know when we got that letter. I know we got it Friday afternoon, and of course, the policy, I think, turns over tomorrow, August 1st. So we were in a short window to do anything, which is another issue entirely in terms of the ability to oversee and manage things like this. And we have to build in an opportunity to adjust and to perhaps, undo if necessary, but that's a separate issue. But the other possibility is, I know at least with homeowners insurance, if you're into a policy and you decide a month, 2 months, 6 months into it that you want to go with another vendor, you do, and then you get a prorated return on your initial policy, and then you begin forward with the new one. Again, this is probably a Rhonda question as to whether if we approve this today, whether we could get those competing bids in the short term, say within the next month or two, and then look at it that way in a more cadence, marketable.
I'm sure that can be done.
Yeah.
And I would rather do that with this start date of August 1st. I would rather.
Yeah, I guess.
I know, I feel like the two, and it says it details that the driving force in insurance premiums today is the replacement cost value of property. The industry has been hampered by increased severity and weather-related claims accompanied by supply and demand challenges with supply chain issues and the scarcity of construction workers. Together, these factors have increased the replacement cost values of our building assets by 11% to a total of $84 million. I mean, I do think, to answer your question, from what I can tell, that is like a, thank you, did I do it?
I think he was able to read that when it came out. And we all understood
I
that.
just needed to
I was
read it
just
for
trying to-
myself.
That's one vendor
Thank you for that
explanation why
clarity.
their rates have gone up. I'm just wondering. if
No, I
these
think
other
that's
vendors-
that's our
Right.
broker representative.
Yeah, okay.
comment, not a vendor. That would be the person we actually, the
Yeah.
one that you can read.
Well, if we're willing to do that, I mean, I'm fine moving forward if we're committed to getting competing bids in the next, foreseeable future. So we can have that benchmark, because in the open by itself, I have nothing to measure it against to determine whether this is a reasonable increase or not.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm sure that she use those competing bids though, and now I feel like.
Well, we have
You know
a
what I'm saying?
broker.
Well, we have a broker, she's working
Yeah,
with
it's
a
okay.
broker
That
person.
Does the competing, I see.
It's like our bond guy.
Yeah.
We have a bond guy too.
Did that person do an assessment of things out there to bring?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And then you bring
Like
your
your-
best, then you
like
bring
we have
your,
an insurance broker.
then you bring your.
Sounds
hopefully
like the
best
approach of approving it, but with the discussion that happens, whether it's Rhonda getting back and answering questions that John has, perhaps to satisfaction in ways that has happened for you in the past. That could be an option. If there's still a strong request to consider something with bids or not, or understand better what the broker process is, that could still happen after today. And if there was some choice we made 3 months from now that was different based on something we're learning, that's something we could address.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've got a note to reach out to her on beginning that whatever process can be used along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
Amsterdam.
maybe Thursday,
Yeah, it won't be,
right?
not for once.
Okay, thank you for the conversation.
All right, thank you.
And Tim, thanks for the workaround in terms of the conversation, trying to piece together information
Yeah,
on
thank you.
things in Rhonda's absence. I
You
know.
know how much we need.
I know.
Rhonda
we
never
were
gets
both
to
looking-
leave, and now we're like.
We looked at each other like,
Yeah.
Continue to not have their star player. You understand? So what
I mean,
happened?
you know, I'm more productive and I can relay for myself.
I appreciate you read aloud. I needed a refresher.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Great.
Renee, I have a, motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Oh, good. Second.
And a second, all right, will you do a roll call, please?
Mrs. Heath,
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller,
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick.
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer,
yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
you making sure I'm doing this?
No, I know the way you tried.
All right, thank you. We are now ready for, superintendent report.
Okay, sir. All right, several personnel items. Number one is a recommendation to approve new personnel. And this is for a new auditorium manager, which is a big deal, to support all the things that happen in our auditoriums. Number two is a recommendation to approve transition days for our new primary school assistant principal, John Hill, and he has jumped into action immediately. He's off and running this week. And those are 5 days that we are recommending. Number three is recommendation to approve personnel changes, and this is really to align these individuals with the new salary schedule for health specialists and interpreters. Number four is recommendation to approve extended days for these individuals who have completed work outside of the regular school year. And it's part of the contract for that work to be done. Number five is recommendation to approve these athletic supplemental contracts. Excited about the upcoming season, which we've got students in, they're on it right now.
It starts today, right?
Yeah,
The
they're,
athletic world
they're-
begins.
that's right, that's right. They're probably all in bed right now, sleeping,
That's
tired.
Exhausted.
Number six is a recommendation to approve these non-athletic supplemental contracts, and the list is long, and it's a big deal. And so, thank you to these individuals who put forth the energy, the time and efforts of their typical day-to-day job, but then also these other ways that keep kids engaged. So student engagement is critical. And then it goes back to support our pillars on wellness, on culture and climate, and just being connected to a program. You'll see some of these, I won't speak to each one of these.
Well, there is one, the area we would like you to speak to, at our retreat coming up, we will talk about the labor agreement we have with, we have a new master contract with the teachers. And so there are some changes, but the changes have already been incorporated here. And if you could talk about the DLT or BLT and language shares,
Yeah.
how that is
And
now
so-
affected in the new contract.
I'll give a global view, and if you want to add more detail, please do. So we have department chairs and we have BLT members. BLT members are part of that building leadership team. And so sometimes people's strengths and their interests are in really connecting with that department and helping to manage the department and to kind of guide them along. Sometimes their interest is really looking at building-wide level issues and how to really talk about instruction across an entire building. Sometimes their interest is in both. And so the great part of the negotiation conversation was to find a way to separate those so that when someone's strength was in one of those areas or interest was in one of those areas, they could do that and still allow someone else who had an interest in the other piece of it to engage. And what it does is it allows for a greater sense of shared leadership, which adds a ton of value to the overall team effort going on. You know, our theme this year is lead from where you are, and it really supports the theme of leading from where you are. Anything else you'd add to that?
I mean, really, the department chair role is, it is totality to 6%. So somebody kind of wanted to take that department liaison, who's
Yeah.
in charge of department meetings, course proposals, textbook adoption, that's a 4% lift. Whereas the person who does the monthly building leadership team meetings, which are about an hour in length or so just every month, that's a 2% lift. So you will see some people are getting the whole 6%. Some people are saying, I just want 4, and we work on the 2. You'll also see there are some folks on there who are doubling up, like our special teachers. So they might be the department chair and the BLT member at the high school, but then they're also the BLT member at the middle school, so they get some additional
So you're the
percentage.
best person in the
Yeah.
job. This came up as part, and really, Karen and I will tell you everything that happened in negotiations when or the changes, because the teachers will be discussing them on the first day of school as well. So we'll be sharing them at the retreat. But this was a lengthy discussion and really, I think came to a great decision in that we now have the best people in the best jobs doing what they want to do.
And
So
being
dividing it
compensated
properly.
properly.
Right.
Probably comes.
Because historically, I think that's a good point, Kara. So you might have something like a K through 12 department chair, okay, like music, art, world language. Well, you could be at the primary, right? That's your home base, and you were the department chair. Well, you also had high school and middle school BLT meetings. Well, I want to attend those because I want to represent my department, but there wasn't compensation for that in the past. So it's made it more equitable so that when you actually share those different workloads, that you're compensated accordingly for your voice and your time, your participation.
And also the BLT dealing with building wide issues. You really want people on there who aren't like, oh, this is like number 20 on my list of things I really want to do as department chair.
Right.
If that is low down on your list, you really want somebody who's going to engage with that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a
It's a
creative.
big picture view.
Yeah.
You know, some people want to just zero in on the department. Yeah, it is.
In the non-athletic spaces, there's some that are volunteer and some that are paid. How do you determine which is like something's new and we're getting started is what the volunteer, or how does that look?
So there's 2 aspects to that, Ilya. So if you have what's like a pilot supplemental, we have flex positions at each building, right? So there is a position available for principals or staff or kids can think that up as long as they have an advisor to say, I don't really know if this would work, but I want to live in that space and see. And then if they have the data, they present that as a formal proposal in the spring to the supplemental committee, and we talk about compensation. There are some folks, because they're great organizations, but they're just so small, or maybe their frequency of meeting, or maybe their kind of involvement or engagement with the community is so small that really they just don't meet the rubric matrix breakdown, and so that continues to be volunteer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very helpful. So if we see these in future, it helps determine like, okay, little science club versus Latin club. That, you know, so those are differently compensated. So it's helpful to know one or the other.
And we evaluate supplementals every year. So each group presents their proposal every year. So even though you might be a volunteer in 23-24, that can change in 24-25. Or if you maybe had a really large group, like things have a really large tech group at high school, and that used to be compensated a little bit more at a higher figure, but now that's kind of waned a little bit because some of the students who were interested in that graduated, still as a group, but the supplemental has been adjusted accordingly.
Right. And sometimes they even go away
Yeah, absolutely.
as interest wanes on that particular organization. All right, great. May I have a motion?
Oh, I still have a few.
Sorry.
That's
You're
okay.
good.
That's all right.
More.
Just 2 more. They're at
More.
the end of that long list.
Sorry.
So number 7, recommendation to approve a resident educator training. And this is for one of our teachers to be trained to support new teachers who are part of that program.
Okay.
And onboarding those staff members, critical process. And number 8 is recommendation to approve a stipend for Xavier University, for payment to this teacher for having a Xavier University student teacher. And those funds are supplied by the university to the district to provide to those cooperating teachers. Now
Now may I have a motion to approve the
So
superintendent? So moved. We got a second?
Yeah.
Will you please call the roll? I will.
Mrs. Zoller?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick? Yes. Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah.
Myself, Mrs. Hughes? Yes.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
one more, and this is for extra work days, up to 10 for this individual who worked outside of the regular school year, and provided this really support the staff and the students. And that's it.
May I have a motion to approve the superintendent's report?
So moved.
May I have a second? Second. May I have a roll call?
There's not an extra one for that. Mrs. Zoller?
Abstain.
Ms. Broderick? Yeah. Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah.
Because then like one and two, there wasn't a, anyway.
All right.
There's not an extra.
We are ready for the superintendent's update.
Okay, it's July 31st. We are ready for the school year.
Still summer, it's still
Yeah.
summer.
And keep saying it's still summer.
At this point, we need kids.
You were ready.
I say we all do. We build up this great anticipation and everything is made better by the presence of kids. And so we are very excited for kids to come in. Yes, it is still summer, especially to families. But we are getting ready for a great year. It's been a busy summer. Many staff members have been engaged in professional development, and that happens every year. And it's important to continue to talk about it. People don't just go away and not spend time individually within their team and in their entire building. So that's been happening. We've added lots of new staff members. We're excited about this coming year. We're going to be connecting our students with R Factor that starts right off the bat on August 14th with grades 3 through 12. And so that's a great connection with our students and our staff. As we talked about the extracurriculars off and running right now, our focus will really continue to be, and I took down the charts that we've been working with, I showed them up, but to continue to align ourselves around the strategic plan is critical. And this year we're talking about a scoreboard where we will reflect with our students, our staff, and our families on how well did the actions that we took this year support the strategic plan, and how well did we move the needle? So that will be more and more of our conversation, but really it's about teaching and learning. We talk about personalizing education, and you saw a little bit of that with the primary report card presentation. Culture and climate, we're talking about how do we make sure people feel valued, connected, and this overall sense of belonging. You see that in all these extracurricular activities that we're offering for kiddos. Communication, it's about partnership. These are the big ideas that we're trying to really make sure that we're wrapping ourselves around, no matter if you're a teacher, or if you're a superintendent, if you work in our cafeteria, no matter what, social emotional well-being. It's about making sure that we're pausing to say, are you okay? Whether that's a student or a staff member. And then with financial stewardship, it's about maximizing the student experience in a cost-effective manner, and that continuing conversation, and that's reflected in the conversation of the board, I think, here tonight. So it's ongoing, trying to align ourselves throughout the entire district around that plan, which is it's our compass that we talk about. So we are excited. So August 8th and 9th, we welcome back staff, and the 10th, we welcome kids back, and I'm gonna try this year and really capture the first 2 days in picture and get it out to families so that they can experience
But
the
you
first 2 days.
never take pictures.
Never done that before.
What?
Never,
Then
never
no.
taken a selfie before.
But maybe I'll put it on Facebook this time. I don't know. We'll see.
You're gonna have to mail those too.
We're gonna need lead time.
It's funny, as a person who's working to have a strategic plan with my organization at work, the idea that we have one and that you're putting measures into it, and at some point you'll be able to look at and see how you're making progress. It's not to be underestimated.
Yeah.
It's a
No,
big
it's
deal.
not. That was hard work.
The measures being the hardest part in many
Plays
places. And maybe the most important thing that actually has value in the strategic plan is sort of like, to get it out of the.
Is it making a difference, right?
And that doesn't always work. Okay, well,
So then,
is that the update?
That's my update.
All right, then we are not adjourning at this point. We are moving into executive session, excuse me, by law, I have to read this. To consider the employment or compensation of a public employee or official, or to consider the purchase of property by competitive bid if disclosure of the information would give competitive advantage to the other side by division of section Ohio Revised Code. May I have a motion to move into executive session? May I have a second?
Oh,
All right, if you would please do a roll call on that.
Ms. Broderick. Yeah. Mr. Feldmeyer.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mrs. Yee. Yes. Mrs. Zeller.
Yes. All right, thank you. We are now in executive session.